Hello, my name is Serena. If you looked at me today, you might see a woman who seems strong, put together, maybe even a little intimidating. But what you wouldn't see is the storm I carry inside, the scars, the betrayals, the nights I cried until my chest ached. I never thought my own sister would be the one to break me in ways a stranger never could. She didn't just betray me, she stole the man I loved and twisted the knife deeper by flaunting it in my face. I still remember the first time I met him. His name was Ethan, and he had this quiet smile that felt like sunlight after years of rain. For the first time in my life, I believed in forever. We planned it all, the wedding, the house, even the names of the children we dreamed we'd have someday. And in every plan, I saw my sister Lily cheering me on, hugging me, promising she was happy for me. I was blind. I thought blood meant loyalty. I thought family meant safety. I was so wrong. The first cracks appeared slowly, a lingering glance between them that I brushed off, a laugh they shared a little too long when I wasn't part of the joke. I told myself I was overthinking, that my sister would never cross that line. But deep down, my stomach twisted every time I saw them together. And still, I chose trust over suspicion. That trust destroyed me. The night Ethan proposed, Lily was the first person I called. She screamed with excitement, promised she'd be my maid of honor, swore she'd stand by my side as I stepped into my new life. I had no idea she was already building hers with him. Looking back, I see all the signs, but at that time, I was blinded by love. I thought I was the lucky one. And then the wedding invitation arrived. Not mine. Hers. A white envelope sealed with gold, carrying words that felt like venom. Come see what true love looks like. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped it. My own sister, my own fiancé, together. And they had the audacity to invite me, to mock me, to drag me into their twisted celebration. I can still hear my heart pounding as I read that line over and over. I cried until there were no tears left, and then I felt something else rise inside me, something dark, something sharp. I wasn't just a victim anymore. That night, a seed of revenge was planted deep in my soul. They thought I would stay silent. They thought I would bow my head and break, but they underestimated me because I decided I was going to attend that wedding, and I wasn't going to show up as the heartbroken sister they expected. No, I was going to show up in a way that would haunt them forever. The days before the wedding were some of the longest and darkest I've ever lived. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning, not my friends, not my family, because no one could understand the storm inside me. Every night, I replayed the image of that invitation in my hands, the cruel words taunting me. And every night, the anger grew, mingling with heartbreak until it became something I could almost taste bitter, sharp, intoxicating. I went through every detail of the ceremony in my mind, imagining the moment I would walk in, the way people would turn their heads, the shock that would ripple through the room when I refused to be invisible. I spent hours in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection, studying my face as if I could memorize every line, every curve, every emotion etched there. I wanted them to see me, to feel the weight of my presence, the strength that had grown from the ashes of betrayal. I chose a dress white, pure, but nothing like the frilly gown a naive bride might wear. This dress was armor, a statement, a warning. When I held it in my hands, I could feel the power it gave me, the way it turned fear into something fierce. And then there was Ethan. I hated him, and yet my heart betrayed me, twisting in ways I couldn't control. I remembered the way he looked at me when he proposed, the softness in his eyes, the trust he had built in me. And now he was smiling at my sister, blind to the deception, thinking he was in love with the wrong woman. My stomach twisted at the thought, but I knew that whatever happened that day, the truth would rise, and I would finally reclaim what was stolen. Every step toward the church felt like stepping through fire. My pulse raced, each beat echoing with the memories of laughter, kisses, and promises. When I arrived, the crowd parted instinctively, as if sensing the storm I carried. Lily's smile faltered the moment she saw me. Her hand froze halfway through, adjusting her veil, and Ethan's jaw tightened. They thought I was here to crumble. They thought I would weep, that I would beg or plead. but I wasn't the same Serena who had cried in silence. I stood at the back of the church, my eyes locked on them, my hands steady, my breathing controlled. I could feel the heat of their panic, the tremor in their smiles. I wasn't just witnessing their wedding, I was the reckoning they didn't see coming. And as the priest began speaking, my heart pounded with the mixture of rage, sorrow, and something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months: exhilaration. Because tonight, the truth would speak. Tonight, I would make them see the consequences of their betrayal. The church held its breath when I walked down the aisle in white. Not the soft bridal white of a girl who believes in fairy tales, but a clean, unapologetic white that felt like a challenge, a bright slash of truth in a room full of lies. People stared because I didn't cry, because I didn't clutch a handkerchief or stumble. I moved with purpose, every step a promise I'd made to myself the night I opened that invitation, and felt something inside me harden into resolve. Lily's eyes flashed with something like fear when she saw me, and Ethan's smile, so practiced, so sure, flickered like a candle in the wind. I reached the front, stood before them, and for a moment the world narrowed to the beat of my own heart. Then, the priest's voice rolled through the rafters, ceremonial and soft, and then came the question that used to mean forever. If anyone objects to this union, speak now. I stood, and I remember thinking how small the word felt in my mouth until I let it swell into a sentence that dropped into the aisle like a stone. I said I object, but I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I pulled my phone from my clutch and hit play, and from its tiny speaker, a voice filled the church. Lily's voice, candid and cruel, laughing as she described how she'd seduced Ethan, how she'd waited until he was vulnerable, how she texted him lines I could read aloud in front of everyone, lines that proved this wasn't some reckless fling but a plan. I had recordings, messages, receipts, hotel bookings, receipts of deposits, everything, because I had feared hiding, and I had prepared for the day they thought they could humiliate me. The first audio clip ended and the second began. Lily boasting about the invitation, about how she wanted me to come watch so she could enjoy my breakdown. The room went still, and I watched Ethan's face as color drained from it, watched him fumble for words that never came. I set the phone on the altar where everyone could see, and then I pulled out another thing I'd carried with me, a small envelope with a single folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and read aloud a message Lily had sent to a mutual friend saying she'd blackmailed Daniel into leaving me by threatening to expose something from his past unless he agreed to play along. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I read them steady because truth, when spoken, has a sound that settles over people and changes them. Murmurs became stifled sobs, smiles froze into horror, and Lily's hands went to her mouth as if to stop the lies pouring out of her own lips. Ethan finally spoke, voice shaking, trying to explain, to say he'd been confused, that it had just happened, that he hadn't meant to hurt me, but the recordings played on and on, piece by piece, revealing how he texted Lily at 2 in the morning, how they'd met, how they'd laughed about me like I was invisible. I felt something inside me loosen and go quiet, not relief so much as a hollow settling where the fight had lived. I had intended to leave then, to walk out and let the cameras of their perfect life catch the stain they'd made, but as heads turned and the priest faltered, someone in the front row, my mother, stood up, her face a mask of hurt and disbelief, and asked in a voice I'd never heard her use before why I had waited so long to tell them. The question hung there, and the answer I wanted to give would have changed everything, but before I could speak, Lily lunged forward, grabbing at my arm, and in the scramble, a paper slipped from her clutch and fluttered to the floor. It was a document I recognized immediately, and when I bent to pick it up, my hands trembled because the words on it would explain everything, and also because they would set in motion something I hadn't planned to unleash yet. I picked up the paper, my fingers shaking, and the room seemed to shrink around me. It was a contract, a business deal, forged in Lily's handwriting, implicating Ethan in a series of deceptions I hadn't known existed. My stomach turned as I realized how carefully they had built their little world of lies, not just around me, but around everyone who trusted them. I cleared my throat, my voice trembling only slightly as I began to read aloud. Each word revealed manipulation, greed, and betrayal that went far beyond a stolen fiancé. It showed how far they were willing to go to cover their own mistakes, how they thought the world would bend to their plans. The crowd shifted, a ripple of disbelief spreading as whispers filled the church. Ethan's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but the words faltered and fell silent. Lily's hands were shaking now, her facade cracking with every syllable. I could feel a strange calm settling over me, as if the storm inside had found its purpose. I wasn't just a victim anymore. The priest paused, unsure how to proceed, and the murmurs turned into gasps of recognition. Friends who had smiled at their happiness now looked between the two of them and me, trying to reconcile the picture they had of love with the chaos that had erupted in front of them. I lowered the paper and looked directly at Lily, my voice quiet but cutting through the tension like a knife. Do you see what you've done? Not just to me, but to yourself, to him, to everyone who believed in you. Her lips quivered, and for the first time I saw fear flicker behind her eyes. Ethan swallowed hard, guilt written across his face in lines that I had never thought I'd see, and yet here it was. I stepped closer to the altar, my heels clicking on the floor, and for a moment the world went silent, except for the hum of my own heartbeat. I felt the weight of every betrayal, every tear I had shed, every sleepless night, and I realized something powerful. I wasn't just seeking revenge, I was reclaiming my voice, my dignity. My life had changed. I could see it reflected in the eyes of those around me. Shock, awe, disbelief. And then I did something I had rehearsed 1,000 times in my mind, something that would mark this day forever. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small box, the one I had kept hidden, the one that contained evidence of everything, not just Lily's lies, but the truth about Ethan's complicity. The room gasped as I set it on the altar and opened it, letting the contents spill across the white cloth. Photographs, messages, receipts, screenshots, every single piece of proof they had tried to hide laid bare for the world to see. Lily's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, while Ethan's shoulders slumped under the weight of exposure. The guests were frozen, unable to process the extent of the deception that had been hidden in plain sight. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch for a moment before I spoke, my voice steady and controlled. This is the truth. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal, here it is. And now you all get to decide who is worthy of your trust. For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, not cruelty, not gloating, just the quiet power of reclaiming control over the chaos that had been forced upon me. And as the whispers grew into a buzz of recognition and shock, I realized something important. This was only the beginning. Lily's hands trembled, and she looked around the church as if searching for a lifeline, some ally who could save her from the storm she had created. But everyone was staring at her now with eyes wide in disbelief, and there was no one to turn to. I felt a strange mix of fury and calm wash over me as I stepped closer, my heels echoing on the polished floor like a drumbeat of judgment. You thought you could humiliate me, I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the room. But you didn't realize that I had been watching, listening, and waiting. You didn't know that every word, every text, every secret you shared, I had recorded, documented, and prepared to reveal.
You thought you were clever. You thought you were untouchable.
But this is your reckoning. Lily's lips parted, but no words came. Ethan tried to step forward to defend her, but I held up my hand, a warning that silenced him instantly. He looked like a child caught in the middle of a storm, guilt etched into every line of his face, and for a moment, I almost felt pity for him. But only for a moment. Then I turned back to Lily, my eyes locked on hers. Do you understand what you've done? Not just to me, but to yourself. You've built a house of lies, and tonight it's crumbling, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The guests murmured, their whispers growing into a wave of shock and realization. Some of them had known me for years, some only casually, but in that moment, they all saw the woman I had become, strong, unshakable, and unafraid to face the darkness thrown at her. I could see Lily's confidence breaking with every second, the mask she had worn for years slipping until only panic and desperation remained. You wanted me to cry, to beg, to fall apart in front of everyone? I continued, my voice carrying like fire, but I didn't. I came here to show you that the woman you tried to destroy is stronger than you could ever imagine. And then I did something that made the room gasp again. I pulled out another envelope, one I had prepared weeks ago, containing details of Lily's manipulation that went beyond Ethan, evidence of lies to friends, family, even business associates. I laid it on the altar beside the first box, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. This is everything, I said. Every lie you've told, every betrayal you've committed, laid bare for the world to see. You wanted an audience for my humiliation, Lily. Congratulations, you have won. But the woman you tried to destroy is standing tall, and she's finally free. Lily sank to her knees, her voice breaking as she whispered, Serena, please. But I turned away. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to answer. The room had already decided. The truth was louder than any apology she could offer, and the satisfaction I felt was quiet, deep, and undeniable. I had taken back my power, and nothing, not even my own heartbreak, could take it from me. The air in the church was thick with shock and tension as whispers turned into murmurs and murmurs into stunned silence. People who had smiled politely at Lily and Ethan now stared at them with wide eyes, their faces betraying the disbelief and horror I had longed for them to feel. I could feel the energy in the room shift, the power of truth radiating from me in waves I hadn't anticipated would feel so satisfying. Lily sank lower into her chair, trembling, her carefully curated image of control shattered, and Ethan's shoulders slumped as though the weight of the truth alone could crush him. I had expected relief when the revelations began, but instead I felt a strange surge of vindication. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. And I was the one holding the scale. My eyes scanned the faces in the crowd. Friends, family, acquaintances, they all looked at me differently now. Some were horrified, some were in awe, but each of them saw the reality I had endured, and it was undeniable. I took a deep breath, allowing myself a small moment to let the chaos sink in before I spoke again, my voice calm but unwavering. You all knew me as someone kind, someone gentle, someone who trusted the people closest to her. But tonight, I think you understand that trust can be broken, that betrayal can come from the ones we love the most, and that strength often grows in the cracks of heartbreak. I turned back to Lily, my gaze sharp and unflinching. You thought I would be the crying, humiliated sister you could laugh at. You thought I'd disappear quietly, that no one would see the truth behind your smiles. But here I am, Lily, standing strong, and I will not let your lies dictate my life any longer. Her face was pale, her lips quivering as she tried to find the words, but nothing came. I could see the panic rising behind her carefully maintained composure, the realization that she had underestimated me in every possible way. And then, something unexpected happened. Ethan's voice broke the tension as he finally spoke, but not in defense of Lily. Serena, I didn't know she was capable of this. I didn't know she planned it this way. I never wanted to hurt you. His eyes searched mine, full of regret and confusion, but the betrayal was too deep to let forgiveness come easily. I felt a pang of sorrow. I had loved him, truly, but it was drowned by the clarity that came with seeing the truth exposed. I didn't hate him the way I had hated Lily. He had been manipulated, yes, but he had also played a part, and tonight, everyone would see that too. As the crowd continued to process the revelations, I realized that the power I felt wasn't about humiliation or revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. I had endured betrayal, heartbreak, and manipulation, but I had also survived. And standing there in the center of the chaos, I knew that this was only the beginning. Lily had underestimated me, and while the ceremony had been disrupted, the real reckoning, the emotional, personal victory, was just starting to unfold. The room buzzed with tension, and I could see that the story of betrayal and revenge that had begun with a wedding invitation would ripple far beyond these walls, changing lives in ways no one expected. The days after the wedding were surreal, like I had stepped out of one world and into another. Everywhere I went, people whispered, exchanged glances, and sometimes outright stared. Friends and family who had once admired Lily now looked at her with quiet suspicion, and I could feel the ripple of my revelation spreading further than I had even imagined. I wasn't just Serena, the sister who had been wronged. I was Serena, the woman who had taken control of her own story, the one who had exposed lies that no one could ignore. Every time I walked into a room, I could sense Lily shrinking under the weight of what had happened, her confidence fading with each sideways glance and whispered comment. She had underestimated me, and now the consequences were unfolding like a storm she couldn't stop. I focused on myself too, on reclaiming the parts of my life that had been stolen. I took walks in the early mornings, breathing in the quiet, letting the anger and heartbreak slowly dissolve into something sharper, more precise clarity. I reconnected with friends I had distanced myself from during my heartbreak, and I began to rebuild my life on my terms. The empowerment that came from reclaiming my voice and exposing the truth was intoxicating, but it was also grounding. I realized that revenge wasn't just about public humiliation. It was about reclaiming my identity and refusing to let betrayal define me. Meanwhile, Lily was unraveling. I heard stories through the grapevine, whispers of confrontations, attempts to manipulate people, and desperate efforts to salvage her reputation. I had offered, but each story was a small satisfaction, a reminder that the web she had woven so carefully was coming apart. She tried to approach me once, her face painted with faux sorrow, but I had learned to guard my heart. I listened to her words, cold and deliberate, then walked away. She realized finally that her attempts to control me had failed, that the power she thought she held was an illusion. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. But peace didn't mean forgetting. Every time I saw Ethan, there was a pang of what I had lost, a sharp reminder of the love I had believed in. Yet, even with the sting of betrayal, I didn't falter. I had been through the fire, and I had emerged stronger. I knew that life had a way of circling back, that karma had its own rhythm, and that Lily's arrogance would eventually lead her to further mistakes. I let it happen. I let her crumble under the weight of her own choices while I rose step by deliberate step, reclaiming the life and happiness that had once been threatened. Every night I reminded myself of one thing: betrayal may wound, but it also teaches. It sharpens you, forces you to see the world more clearly, to trust yourself above all else. And with that truth in my heart, I stepped into a new life, fully aware that my story had only just begun, and that the best revenge was living well, boldly, and on my own terms. Life after the wedding wasn't simple, but it was mine. Every morning I woke up with a sense of ownership over my own story, a clarity that had been buried under betrayal and heartbreak for too long. I threw myself into work, into friends, into experiences I had once postponed because my life had revolved around someone else's lies. I was discovering who I was beyond the shadow of Lily and Ethan, beyond the heartbreak that had threatened to define me. But even in that freedom, I couldn't ignore the tremors that lingered. The occasional ping when I saw Lily's name pop up in messages, the sharp sting when someone mentioned Ethan. Life moved forward, but the scars remained. Reminders of how high the stakes had been, how deeply betrayal could cut. Then, unexpectedly, new people entered my life. Friends, colleagues, even strangers who didn't know my story yet but saw the fire in my eyes. One person in particular caught my attention. Someone completely different from Ethan, someone steady and kind but also perceptive, who saw through my walls without breaking them. There was a tension in our conversations, a quiet electricity that reminded me that love didn't have to be about pain. Slowly, carefully, I allowed myself to trust again, not blindly, but with awareness, with the lessons of betrayal guiding me. Meanwhile, Lily's spiral continued. Her attempts to manipulate her way back into control only made her fall further. I watched from a distance as her lies unraveled in front of people who had once believed her, as friends and family began to question everything she had done. It was satisfying in a way that wasn't cruel. It was justice, natural, and inevitable. I no longer needed to intervene. Her actions were self-destructive, and I could finally step back and witness the truth being recognized by everyone around her. Yet, even as I rebuilt my life, the past sometimes caught me off guard. I received messages, snippets of conversations, glimpses of Ethan trying to explain, trying to justify, trying to reconnect. I read them, but I didn't respond. My heart had healed enough to recognize manipulation when it appeared, and I refused to let myself be dragged back into a story that had been defined by lies. I had learned the power of restraint, of patience, of allowing the truth to speak louder than my anger. By the end of that year, I had transformed. I was no longer the Serena who cried silently in her room, powerless and betrayed. I was Serena, the woman who faced betrayal head on, who reclaimed her dignity and her life, who learned that revenge didn't always mean destruction. It could also mean rising above, living boldly, and letting those who hurt you fall by the weight of their own actions. And with each passing day, I felt the last traces of heartbreak fading, replaced with strength, clarity, and the quiet, unshakable satisfaction of survival. Just when I thought I had begun to rebuild my life, the past came back to haunt me in a way I hadn't expected. One afternoon, a package arrived at my door. No return address, only my name written in careful, familiar handwriting. My heart sank as I opened it, revealing photos, emails, and texts that I hadn't seen before. Proof that Ethan and Lily's betrayal had run deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just about the wedding or the stolen engagement. There were financial deceptions, secret meetings, and manipulations designed to ruin me behind the scenes. The realization hit like a cold wave. Their plan had been far more calculated, far more malicious than I'd known. My stomach twisted, but instead of fear or despair, a new surge of determination took over. I wasn't going to be blindsided again. I spent hours going through the evidence, connecting dots that had been hidden in plain sight, and for the first time, I began to understand the full extent of their deceit. It was infuriating, yes, but it was also empowering. Every lie they had crafted now had a purpose to fuel my next move, to give me the ammunition I needed to ensure they could never hurt me or anyone I cared about again. I knew I couldn't confront them publicly yet. The timing had to be perfect, the strategy precise. This was no longer about heartbreak, it was about complete reclamation of my life and dignity. I reached out quietly to a few trusted allies, people who could help me navigate the fallout without exposing my intentions prematurely. Every step I took was deliberate, every conversation carefully worded. I couldn't afford mistakes because Lily's recklessness had been nothing compared to the meticulous planning I was capable of now. And as I worked behind the scenes, I felt a thrill, a strange satisfaction that this time I was the one in control. The tables had turned completely and I relished the feeling. Meanwhile, whispers of what had happened at the wedding were still circulating. People approached me in stores, at work, and even online, sharing their shock and admiration. The story of betrayal and the courage it took to expose it had given me a reputation I hadn't sought but now carried like armor, and yet deep down I knew the story wasn't finished. The revelations in that package reminded me that there were still layers I hadn't uncovered, still consequences Lily hadn't faced, and still truths that had to come to light. That night I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights casting long shadows on the walls, and for the first time in months I allowed myself to smile. Not the fragile, tentative smile of someone who hoped for happiness, but the quiet, satisfied smile of someone who knew that they held the power now. The storm was far from over, but I had weathered enough to know that when it ended, it would be on my terms. And deep inside, I realized something crucial. Revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about reclaiming your life, your voice, and your strength, and this time I was unstoppable. The moment I had been waiting for finally arrived. I had spent weeks planning every detail, anticipating every move, and now it was time to strike with precision. I knew Lily's arrogance would make her underestimate me again, and that was exactly what I needed. She believed that exposing her once at the wedding had silenced me, that I had been humiliated enough that I would retreat quietly, But I had been anything but quiet. I had been building, gathering, and preparing to show her that betrayal has consequences far beyond what anyone can imagine. Every meeting she attended, every business deal she handled, every conversation she had, I had tracked it all, documented it all, and now I was ready to reveal the full extent of her manipulations. I arranged a gathering, seemingly innocuous under the guise of a celebration for mutual friends. Lily, of course, arrived, radiant and smug, thinking she still held the upper hand. I watched her from across the room, noting every confident gesture, every self-assured smile, knowing it would all crumble in minutes. As the evening progressed, I let the tension build slowly, carefully. I didn't confront her outright. I allowed whispers and subtle questions to circulate among the guests, letting suspicion take root. The subtle, poisonous seeds of doubt spread until even Lily could feel the walls of control she had built begin to shift beneath her. And then the moment came. I invited everyone to gather in the main hall, citing an important announcement. Lily's expression shifted instantly. There was unease there, a flicker of the panic she had tried so hard to hide before. I took the floor calmly, projecting a composed strength that made all eyes fall on me. I began recounting with deliberate clarity the manipulations she had carried out behind the scenes, not just with Ethan, not just with me, but with friends, family, and business partners. I didn't embellish. I let the evidence speak for itself. Screenshots, photos, messages, financial records, all carefully displayed, all undeniable. Gasps spread through the room as the truth unfolded. Lily's confidence collapsed in real time. She tried to interrupt, tried to spin lies, but every word was countered with undeniable proof. Her face went pale, her hands shook, and for the first time I saw raw fear in her eyes, the kind that comes from realizing that the house you built on lies has no foundation left. Ethan was there too, forced to watch the woman he had once loved crumble under the weight of her own arrogance. And in that moment, I felt a surge of vindication, not cruel, not gloating, but a quiet, unshakable satisfaction that came from knowing justice was finally being served. By the end of the evening, Lily had no allies left, her web of deceit completely exposed. People who had once been fooled by her charm now saw the truth, and the shame and panic on her face was a testament to the power of exposing deception fully. As I watched her struggle to regain composure, I realized that revenge wasn't just about making her suffer, it was about reclaiming my life, my power, and my peace. And as I left that hall that night, I knew that this chapter was closing and that the woman standing tall and victorious was me. After the gathering, the aftermath unfolded with a weight that was almost intoxicating. Everywhere I went, the whispers followed, not the cruel gossip of the past, but the awe of people who had witnessed the unraveling of deception, who had seen the truth exposed in its rawest form. Lily's social circle was fractured, her reputation in ruins, and I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of satisfaction knowing that the arrogance and cruelty she had wielded so freely had turned against her. Yet even as I observed the ripple effects, I realized that revenge wasn't just about public humiliation. It was about ensuring that the people who had tried to control or manipulate me could never harm me again. Every step she took now was measured against the weight of her own exposed lies. I focused on rebuilding the life I had lost, on reestablishing trust and joy in the corners of my world that betrayal had darkened. But it wasn't easy. The wounds left by Ethan and Lily cut deep, and some days the memories threatened to overwhelm me. Still, I moved forward with a careful, deliberate strength, learning that the true power of revenge lay not just in exposing lies, but in reclaiming your peace, your dignity, and your voice. Friends who had drifted away returned, drawn by the raw honesty of my story, and slowly, I began to see that life could still hold moments of genuine connection, laughter, and even love. Then came an unexpected twist. A message arrived, anonymous but urgent, hinting at a secret that neither Lily nor Ethan had anticipated being revealed. It was evidence that reached beyond the wedding, beyond the stolen love, a hidden truth that could shift the balance further. My pulse quickened as I read it, the thrill of a new chapter of justice coursing through me. This wasn't about malice, it was about uncovering the full extent of deception, about making sure that everything hidden in shadows came into the light. I realized that the story wasn't finished yet, that the final act of exposure would ensure no remnants of their lies remained intact. I reached out to a trusted few, people who could help me navigate this last phase, and together we prepared to reveal the truth fully. Every document, every message, every hidden detail was organized, ready to confront the world with undeniable proof. And when the day came to present it, the impact was immediate. The whispers of disbelief turned into stunned silence, and I watched Lily and Ethan crumble once more, knowing that this time there could be no recovery. The final twist had landed, and it was as devastating as it was satisfying. As I stood there observing the aftermath, I felt a profound sense of closure. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, they had forged me into someone unbreakable, someone capable of facing darkness and emerging victorious. And though the scars remained, they were a testament not to weakness, but to survival, resilience, and the undeniable power of truth. The storm had passed, and in its wake, I was finally free. The day the last piece of truth came to light, I felt a weight lift from my chest, a heaviness I hadn't realized I was carrying for years. Lily's lies were exposed completely. Ethan had no excuses left, and the people who had once doubted me now looked at me with awe, as if recognizing the woman I had become. I wasn't defined by betrayal anymore. I was defined by strength, by courage, and by the power of standing tall when the world tried to break me. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment I thought I couldn't survive had led me here. And now, I finally understood what true victory feels like. Not in cruelty, but in reclaiming your life and your dignity. I looked around at the faces of those who had witnessed the truth and felt a quiet satisfaction. The whispers, the stunned silence, the disbelief. It wasn't revenge, it was justice, it was clarity, it was freedom. I realized that being hurt had taught me something invaluable. Betrayal doesn't define you, and the only approval you need is your own. I had taken back my voice, my power, and my peace. And that was something no one could ever take away. The scars of the past remained, yes, but they were badges of survival, proof that I had endured, fought, and emerged stronger than ever. And as I stood there, the sun setting outside, casting golden light into the room, I felt the weight of the story finally lift. I had faced heartbreak, humiliation, and deception, and I had survived not just with grace, but with the quiet triumph of someone who had refused to be broken. This was my life, my story, my victory, and it was only beginning. To anyone watching who has ever felt betrayed, humiliated, or powerless, remember this. Your strength is in reclaiming yourself, speaking your truth, and never letting anyone else control your story. And if my journey resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe, like, and share, not just to follow my story, but to witness a tale of courage, resilience, and the power of rising above. Because the greatest revenge isn't in destruction, it's in living boldly, unapologetically, and free. And as I step forward into my life, I do so fully aware that the woman I am now can never be broken again.